Hi, this is Todd from thestringclub.com. In this video I'll show you how to put fingerboard tapes on your violin. Now the reason people use fingerboard tapes is that there's no indication of where the notes are on the fingerboard, and it can be very frustrating for beginners who haven't yet built up the skills they need to know where the notes are. I've discovered that students typically need them for a year or so, maybe 2 years, until they've developed the ear skills and the muscle memory to be able to tell where the notes are without too much trouble. So if you put the tapes on at some point, you'll just realize that you're not really using them anymore and you can go ahead and take them off. But it does save a lot of frustration in the early learning process to use the tapes. Now before we put the tapes on, you'll have to know what size your instrument is. Of course, most of you will be playing on a full-size instrument, but there are fractional sizes for children: 3/4, half, 1/4, and even smaller instruments. So here's an example of a half-size violin. And believe it or not, there's even a 16th size violin. Now what you'll need to complete this task is the tapes, a ruler, and a pencil. That's it. I think the String Club fingerboard tapes are the best bet for a couple reasons. First of all, sometimes you'll see students with like little dots in the middle of the fingerboard and those kind of things. And those are okay, but it's much better to have a tape that goes all the way across the fingerboard, because on the outer strings you still have to guess a little bit as to where the note is. When it's a tape that goes all the way across, you can be 100% sure that you're in tune. And secondly, it's nice to have individual tapes like the ones we provide, because you can actually feel the edges of the tapes. That's really handy if, for instance, you're looking at the sheet music, you don't want to take your eyes off to look at the tapes. You can actually just kind of slide your finger back and forth a tiny little bit, and you'll sense exactly where that tape is. Also, we provide a measuring card, which makes this process really easy. All you do is set the card up against the fingerboard, transfer the marks onto the right spots, and put the tapes on. So it's a kind of a surefire way to get the spacings correct. There is one little detail we need to discuss before talking about how to measure out the marks. And that is what the nut is and where to measure from. So the nut is this raised piece of ebony right here at the end of the fingerboard where the strings cross over into the peg box. You always want to measure the distances from the inner edge of the nut as opposed to the outer edge where the strings cross over into the peg box. So this inner edge is where the vibrating part of the string starts, and that's where we need to measure from. If you bought the String Club fingerboard tapes, it comes with a measuring card, which makes this process very easy. All you have to do is put the edge of the measuring card on the inner edge of the fingerboard, and then transfer the marks onto the fingerboard with the pencil. So like that, just make 4 small pencil marks right on those lines. If you don't have the fingerboard tapes, it's still a pretty easy process. All you do is you take a ruler and measure them out instead. And you always want to make sure to get the measuring line, the beginning of the line, right at the edge of the nut, like this. Now this is a full-size violin, so I'll be using the measurements for a full size. And if you would like the measurements for the other sizes, just look down below in the description in this video, and you will find the measurements both in millimeters and in inches. So on the full size, I'm going to go to 35 millimeters and make a small mark. The next one is at 66, and then it's at 80, and the last one is 106. And again, if you prefer inches, just look in the information below this video. All right, so now I have 4 marks in the correct spots. Now I go to the tapes. I'm going to peel off the backing of this. And then I slip the tape under the 4 strings, like that. Center it right over the center of the pencil mark. You also want to be very careful that it's not crooked, that it's going straight across the fingerboard, not angled one way or the other. So before you stick it down, just visually check to make sure that it looks perfectly straight. You'll notice that tape number 2 and 3 are very close together. That's how that's supposed to be, because it's a half step, which are notes that are closer together. So there we go for tape number 3. And then number 4. Sometimes it's hard to get through all 4 strings. You may want to come down lower where the strings are farther off the fingerboard. That gives you a little more room, and then slide it into position. And there we go, we've got our 4 tapes on. Now we can check this against a tuner. So it's very important that you have your strings tuned before checking with the tuner, otherwise you're checking something that doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to tune my A string, just make sure that's in tune. There you go. And now when I press my first finger on the first tape, it should say B. You see the tuner says it's in tune. Second finger should say C sharp. Third should say D. And the last one should say E. There we go. So we have a completed fingerboard tape setup.